Welcome. Welcome to Co-Evolutionary Culturing, composting power over culture from the inside out, the podcast from Starter Culture with Sara McFarland. Today, my guest is my dear friend, colleague, and mentor, Bill Plotkin. He is the founder and impossible dreamer at the heart of Animas Valley Institute, which he has been co-creating with other guides for 40 years. I have had the honor and delight to study with Bill for about 10 years, and I've been in the Guides Guild for the Institute for the last few years, which means I've had the pleasure of grappling with these kinds of questions about human consciousness, human development, how we respond to these times, what Earth is dreaming through us as a species. In this conversation, we continue those threads of wonderment together, and we have the audacity to imagine beyond the limits of what we think is possible, which is something we love to do together. I want to name here that we call each other by different names. I call Bill Impossible Dreamer, and he calls me Hologram Heart. In our community of work, these names are ways that we gesture towards our soul image, our eco-spiritual, psychological niche in the web of life that we at Animas understand to be the definition of a human soul. So I hope you'll enjoy the conversation about transitional communities, personal, initiatory culture, and potentially a species-wide initiation that this crisis might be calling us towards. Here's a wander through the wild and holographic terrain of initiation culture with Bill Plotkin. Okay, so welcome. I'm so honored and happy to be, I would say, sitting here with you, even though we're through the virtual portal that is Zoom. But so actually wonderful to be looking into your eyes and sharing this strange distant space, which feels very close from all the years we've known each other, all the memories and ways of being together, just filling my psyche and my heart, my body right now, all the places we've been in the wild.
Yeah, I'm feeling into the same thing about being in wild places with people exploring and being claimed by their wildness that you and I have shared together. And those moments we've looked each other in the eye and without using words, realizing, oh, this is what's happening. And there you are. And here I am. Here we are together. And we're diving into this. Yeah. So thanks for evoking that, because that's a context. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And while I was listening in, what I was feeling into those edges and of kind of the field of possibilities that you are and the field of possibilities that I am and the context of these days, and wondering like, oh, where's the place that those two ecotones meet, or where's the overlap there? How might we invite that kind of conversation that is generative and rich, biodiverse, and rich in its nutriment and capacity to nourish and inspire for ourselves, firstly, because I'm selfish, and then hopefully for the people who might be listening.
With any luck at all. Yeah, let us be
with
surprised.
Any luck at all. Yeah. So if that feels okay for you to start with, to just listen in or share with us, me, what's at the edges these days? What's at the emergent edge? I know you to be a person who uh, your capacity to travel width and breadth and depth of consciousness, um, and the way that you are imaginally and intellectually present in the world, and the capacity that you have. You make leaps or connections or go to places that people don't necessarily tend to go on the surface, for sure. So I'm curious, like, where are you these days?
Yeah. Good open question there. Um, let me start with this. I'd this is something I'd like to do even more than I've been doing it. Maybe I want to do it more consciously. And that is imagine about people or treat people as if they, and I really mean we, are capable of more than we thought we were,
Mm.
and to ask more from us.
Mm-hmm.
And here's at least one version of that. Um, I think we, who's we, humans in general, but the kinds of people who'd be listening to this conversation, I think we are capable, more capable than I believe most people think we are. We're more capable of recognizing that the world is actually really quite profoundly different in reality, in its true nature, than the way we've come to be raised in, dominator, egocentric culture to believe what the world is.
Mm-hmm.
And even those of us who are pretty progressively oriented and might think of ourselves as um, evolutionary agents, um, that the world really is quite a bit different. And the opportunities we have, the possibilities are greater than we would usually think or agree when we're in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So let me try to get a little bit more specific. Um, when we talk about things like starter culture, which is you and your colleagues' topic, and when we talk about things like human development, which is more generally my topic, or a little bit more specifically, soul, um, I believe we mean something different than most of us understand or consciously grasp. Um, that um, that the project is bigger and deeper and different than we actually believe it is. Um, that and one of the implications is that we're not likely to have any really major change in our lifetime
Mm-hmm.
because things just work slower than that.
Mm-hmm.
So partly I'm bringing in the deep time context here. Um, and I want to bring in the context that what's going to help us or save us is not primarily knowledge at all or information, but a shifting in our sense of an experience of what it is to be alive, what the world is, what the possibilities are, um, the context in which it has taken, just culturally speaking, human culturally speaking, thousands of years to get to the dilemma we're in now, which is a real doozy. And it could easily take several generations to get to some significant place from here. So part of egocentric culture, which is the way that I think of most contemporary cultures, and I suspect you do too. Um, in egocentric culture, we are often asking the question, at least implicitly, what can I do in my lifetime? I want to do something significant in my lifetime. I want to see something really big happen. I mean, really big changes are needed here. It's so obvious. And we tend to think in terms of single lifetimes, which is part of our not having really true deep communities.
Mm.
Because communities don't last a single lifetime,
Mhm.
human lifetime. They have roots way, way, way back of the ancestors, and they go way, way forward into the future ones, the unborn ones, the great, great, great grandchildren who haven't been even dreamed yet.
Mm.
So a community thinks in terms of really big, deep, large expanses of time. And in egocentric culture, it's more individualistic, and
Mm.
we have 5-year plans and 10-year plans. And so what is it like to have, at Animus, we often say 300-year plans, and
Mhm.
that's a pretty short amount of time. Um, so, um, yeah, I could go in a few other directions there, but I wanted to invite you and me and anyone listening here to consider that most of the projects we can conceive of are too small. Or actually, the size is not exactly the issue. It's that they have too many of their roots in the problem, which is
Mm.
contemporary egocentric, anthropocentric, androcentric, um, contemporary human cultures. Um, and if we're grasping for solutions, big changes that can be made in 5 years or 10 years or 25 years or 100 years, we might be um, attempting the wrong kinds of things. Okay, hologram, take that. Where do you want to go with that?
I, I love you. Ah, yes. I was just having a conversation with somebody the other day um, about 500 years.
Mhm.
Um, and so I love that you're starting with bringing in the deep time, being a holographic person, especially. But yeah, so I'm hearing you say that my ears perked up when you said it's different than the way most people are, the worldview is too small, or the worldview is different than most people are um, understanding it to be, most contemporary people. And you named um, deep time and communities being rooted in ancient time and for the future ones rather than rooted in the current consciousness of modernity. So I'm wondering, of course, what other differences are you tracking? And I'm hoping that those are some of the things you were saying you could go in a few different directions. Uh, but the last piece you said there about the consciousness being rooted in, or the way, I don't know if you said the word consciousness, but for me, it's the way that consciousness is rooted in the um, short-sighted, misguided, androcentric, uh, human-centric worldview. Um, I would say is probably one of the main things I offer my life energy to is tending that shift from human-centric to earth-centric, or from, which is a time shift, it's a space shift, it's a context shift, it's a worldview shift for how we might tend to, rather than operating within a small frame, expanding our frame to include the multidimensionalities, some of which you just named. So do you want to say any more of the differences or any other
Um,
threads that you're excited about?
yeah, there's so many. One is, of course, as you know, um, I've come to believe, I'm quite certain, that most contemporary humans um, get stuck in early adolescence, the psychological stage of early adolescence. Um, and but that's quite a claim. I mean, if
Mm.
we just hang out with the implications of if that was true, that the vast majority, like more than 95% of contemporary humans never, well, they don't never reach true adulthood, but we as humans in general, don't even reach late adolescence.
Mm.
Um, it's a hard one to swallow. And it really, for me, that's an example of requiring a deep time perspective. If that's true, then it started a long, long time ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how did we get to here? How is it that the human species is so perfectly designed to create for itself a dilemma of this sort, which has now implicated every other life form and habitat on this planet? How is it, how is it that the human species is so beautifully, deeply, cleverly designed to create such an extraordinary initiatory moment, not only for itself, but for everything?
That's the conversation I want to have with you. But before
Oh,
we go there,
yeah.
uh, could you just, for the people who are listening, just give like a mini, because you used a little bit of animus speak around early adolescent and late
Yeah.
adolescent. If you just like scoop everybody up and make sure
Yeah.
people know the context of what you're talking about before we go to that really delicious question or thing you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see if I can do it briefly. Early adolescence is that stage in life that starts at puberty and psychological puberty, which can be anywhere from like 9 to 15 when it starts, usually around 11. Um, it's that early adolescence is that stage in which we are separating from our psyches being anchored in the value system and the worldview of our parents and our family more generally, and going out more broadly into the social sphere, the human village, and looking for what are the values and the worldviews, the way of being in relationship to myself, including my sexuality and gender, but socially and intellectually and imaginatively and artistically more generally. What is more my way? That's in order to become fully human, we have to thank with immense gratitude our parents and family for having made us into a version of a human, a version that has a particular ethnic and familial, maybe religious context, and giving me this launching pad, this beautiful launching pad to go out and find who I am more fully and authentically in the social realm. It's just in the social realm. Like, what is my style? Um, what is my music? What is my way of expressing my gender and my sexuality? Um, what are my interests? How do I like to move my body? Uh, what is a friend? How do I what is my way of building friendships? What is it for me to be authentically me in the village at the oasis? That's early adolescence. It's our first time consciously, or at least semi-consciously, creating a persona. Whereas we had one in childhood, a persona, but we didn't think about it much. We weren't self-conscious about it so much. And it was very much rooted in our family and our peer group and our, our kid peer group and so on. So that's what I mean by early adolescence. And we get stuck there. Most contemporary humans get stuck there because of challenges we had in the first two stages of life, early childhood and middle childhood. And then we didn't complete, or we didn't address the developmental tasks of those stages, or in early childhood, our families didn't address our needs, developmental needs, as fully as they could have. So by the time we get to through puberty into early adolescence, where we have so much unfinished business that we just get stuck. And so personal authenticity, social authenticity becomes incredibly difficult. And so many contemporary humans just fall back on a substitute to authenticity that we could call conformity. How do I fit in? I need to fit in at all costs, and fitting in as an early adolescent is essential. But the developmental task is to fit in an authentic way, but we've lost the capacity for the most part to do it authentically. Okay, how's that?
Great.
Attempt to summarize a couple hundred pages of text there.
Thank you. Yeah. And do you want to try and summarize even more pages of text and entire books for late adolescents in a very, very simple
Yeah.
way?
Yeah. Okay. So if early adolescence is semi-consciously crafting a persona that is authentically me and generates enough social belonging that I have friends, that I can walk into some rooms and people go, yeah, there he is. Okay. So if once that's complete, now next there's a bigger question of not who am I authentically in my social group, but who am I authentically as a human animal born at this particular time in this particular place on this planet, and what is the gift that I was born to be and to give to the world as my little contribution to enhancing life in my ecosystem, which ultimately is the Earth. So now the identity question is much, much deeper than early adolescence. Early adolescence was kind of on the surface, on the horizontal plane, I should say, not necessarily superficial, horizontal social plane. And then in late adolescence comes the vertical dimension where, partly it's going up, that's another couple hundred pages, or going down, but particular in late adolescence, going down into the depths, which is to say towards soul, towards the identity I was born with, and then I forgot at, at the moment or the time of birth. And now it's time to go remember that. Who did I come here to be? Okay,
Great.
shorthand.
Thank you. Beautiful. Okay, now given that, let's go back to where we were before that, which is something like how, I love how you phrased it. I don't know if you can remember, but it's something like, how is the human species so beautifully gifted at creating the conditions that we find ourselves in today? And I love how you're asking that because one of my questions has been, what is Earth up to? And humans are part of Earth. Like there's this larger context of something's happening here that is not about blame. It's actually this exquisite crisis, actually, right? That we that might be being dreamed through us by Earth in this moment. That's how I would say it. But did I can I catch the
Yeah,
meaning of what you were pointing to? Yeah.
yeah, it's something like, sometimes I think that Earth made a really big gamble on us, or any living planet takes a really big risk at some point, maybe a few times,
Hmm.
because maybe early experiments don't work, and we might be in an early experiment that doesn't work. Um, but yeah, so living planets make this audacious move of evolving a species that is actually capable of being a conscious evolutionary partner with the planet. But to do that, that we have to that species, in this case, we humans, have to um, evolve or generate or have generated for us a certain capacity of consciousness that's really risky. Um, and um, the form of consciousness I'm talking about is called a few things, but often one of them is um, conscious self-reflection, that we're aware that we're aware. And as my my beloved Janine Marie Hagen says, that we have we humans have a capacity to imagine the future. Maybe that's really core to who we are as a species. Like our gift to the world is a capacity to imagine the future and to make it real with our capacities that include language and opposable thumbs and so on, science, technology. Um, and when a species shows up on a living planet with that kind of capacity, it's dangerous to itself, the planet. And so we often use, as you know, the analogy that Earth is going through a initiatory process now that is maybe in some ways similar to the initiatory process that individual humans must go through in order to be initiated into their, their adult work, their soul work. And we know from stories from some intact indigenous traditions that the initiatory process is very risky. And there's a certain percentage of youth that do not physically survive it. Melodrama Sommeil implied, maybe 2 or 3%. And I've heard from other indigenous scholars that it could be as high as 20% in some traditions. So that's risky. Why would an initiatory journey have to be so risky? That's something we could wonder about. And then back to the human species or the planet. Why is why is it so risky? Why is that a power that is necessarily risky? Um, and yeah, okay, I could go in a variety of directions, but where would you like to take us?
I'm curious if you would frame the why is it so risky? Would you frame it something like, why does transformation require death?
Um, well, what are we talking about? Why does deep transformation, require risking
Or risking
um,
death?
corporeal
Although,
death? Yeah.
but some
And
kind of death is actually always at the heart of transformation, even if it's not corporeal.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we might say, like the journey of soul initiation requires a dying to who we thought we were and what we thought the world was. It's a psychological dying that goes deeper and has bigger um, implications than the kind of death in a psychedelic journey with a heroic dose. It's bigger than that. Um, it's not something you come down from after 4 or 8 hours. It's a bigger kind of dying. And then we might ask if there has to be that kind of psycho-spiritual dying, would it be surprising that sometimes we physically die?
Hmm. No.
That that it's that risky. Maybe why is it like in indigenous traditions we've heard about where youth physically die? Why do they physically die? I don't know if we what comprehensive an answer we might have of that, but sometimes it is in order to bring about that psycho-spiritual dying, often practices are used that are physically um, risky, very physically
Mm-hmm.
risky. And that physical risk itself is a catalyst of a psychospiritual transformation.
Because it creates
So,
a particular kind of tension in the psyche.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or sometimes we're not thinking strategically as well as we would during an initiatory journey than we would at other times. And
Mm-hmm.
so and one thing we do strategically is take care of ourselves physically. And when the strategic mind is on hold, um, we might have less capacity to care for ourselves. physically. Plus, initiatory journeys in the indigenous traditions we know about don't take place within uh, a medical clinic with two or three um, people caring for you while you're lying on a bed in a comfortable, air-conditioned room with headphones on with great music. Um, it's
Yeah.
much riskier settings.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah. Yeah. So if this, the thing that I've been sitting with lately and was just talking with Manda Scott about actually is the crisis and the call,
Mhm.
and how we humans, I agree, have created, imagined, or stumbled into um, an incredible crisis, like a no way out kind of crisis. We couldn't have done better if we'd planned it
Yeah.
in a way. It's what's that phrase? A perfect storm. Um, okay, so we're in a point of no return, one way threshold, one way portal into something. And we don't know if we're going to survive, and we don't know if the planet's going to survive. That's the crisis. So, and the thing I'm curious about is the call, the thing that's calling us over the threshold into the depths. And I'm curious about that kind of collectively as a species in these times, um, as well as the gift of the forward-thinking imagination. What if one of the gifts of the forward-thinking imagination, you named technology and science, I would add art and and beauty making to that, in a way of like, well, what if this forward thinking, we were talking about when we saw each other last, these transitional cultures that are needed as which do need to happen actually quickly, right? Those need to happen within the next 5 to 10 years, right? um, if not sooner, but get established within the next 5 to 10 years, so that we have a way of moving through this, so that not everybody dies, to tend the journey until something new is born, until consciousness has been transformed, until whatever the initiatory journey is happens, and we don't come down from the high, rather we emerge up from the depths, um, at the end, in 3 or 500 years. Um, so what's the call that is going to not only uh, bring us over the threshold through beauty and allurement and longing, like we talk about with the personal journey of soul initiation. Um, Otherwise, usually we'd run screaming in the other direction most of the time. There has to be something that's alluring and irresistible about it, in addition to the danger or the risk that you've just been speaking of. So I'm curious, like, oh, what's the potential there for the human imagination? Maybe we're doing a misplaced concretism. We're thinking we need to imagine the future of how it's supposed to be in 20 years, rather than what's the imaginal gift and beauty making and art or whatever else, the cultural artisans that you speak of, that we're tending, that would be the thing that would inspire such a someone to go on such a journey, because it does require a particular level of participation, or maybe it doesn't. That's a whole other conversation. Is that
Um, yeah, let me ask a quick clarification. Are you
mm.
asking about the individual call or more like the species being called on a species level?
I mean, in this case, I'm talking at the species level, because we were just naming the
Yeah.
crisis that we as a species have gotten ourselves into. And there's the sort of the part of me that wants to be tending the death of modernity. But there's also the artist of me and the awareness of me that is dreaming into, what's calling us into and through and on the journey of initiation. So that because if it's just a crisis and we're resisting it, or we're running screaming in the other direction, then we just have splat all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And so my question maybe is more like, how do we tend something that might be a visionary gift, fire, that we're carrying, so that it's an initiatory journey and not a splat.
Right. Yeah.
Sixth mass
Splats.
extinction in this case.
Yeah. Mass extinction that goes a lot further than it has already. But that's baked in the cake. Let me start with the individual and then go use that as an analogy for the species. So the call for the individual is our own soul. But I should say now that by soul, I mean something different than most anybody in the contemporary world mean. I definitely don't mean in the religious sense or even in the psychology sense of, our psyches, our authentic psyches. I mean it in the ecological sense. I've come to use the word soul ecologically to mean a thing or a creature's authentic place in the larger Earth community. Another way to say that is um, the ecological niche that we were born to take as individuals. And that why would I use the word soul to refer to an ecological niche? It's because the general connotation of the word soul is it means something like true, meaningful, authentic, uh, deepest purpose, um, a true place. Um, and I think all of those things come from the place in the larger Earth community that we were born to take, our ecological niche. And because every creature on this planet is born with knowledge, with actual knowledge of how to take its place. That 95+% of species don't have parents after birth. Don't they don't learn, they don't socially learn how to take their place. They're born with that knowledge. And just the mammals and birds who learn a lot socially from others, from their people. Um, but like the other 95% of species, we mammals and birds, are born with knowledge of how to take our to of how to enhance life in the unique way that we were born to do that. So after early adolescence, when we reach late adolescence, which is the time, the stage when we go through the journey of soul initiation, then one thing that changes when we enter late adolescence is that our ears, so to speak, um, are able to, it's really our hearts, the ears of our hearts are able to hear the call of our soul, the call, and it's the call of a place, a niche. A niche is not a habitat. It's a particular way of being in a habitat. Um, and in late adolescence, we start being able to hear that place, that niche in the world calling to us. And it gets us as deeply as anything could get us. But it won't get us until late adolescence. And then the longing to meet, to merge with that place, that ecological niche, our soul, is immense. In a healthy late adolescent, that's the strongest pull. Um, and we recognize consciously the cost and the risk of saying yes, and we say yes anyways. Um, I'm thinking of that Rumi poem where it's something about wanting the kiss
The
that will
price
kill
of
you.
kissing is your life. What a bargain. I'll buy it.
Thank you for remembering those lines. Exactly those lines. What a bargain, I'll buy it. So, so that's what happens in late adolescence, which again, the vast majority of temporary humans never reach. There is that longing. And it's so strong, it tears us away from our social belonging. And we're willing and maybe even wanting to wander deeper and deeper into the world. As Mary Oliver says, determined to do the only thing we can do, determined to save the only life we can save, which is the life of our soul. And and we do it. The call is that strong. If without the call, without the awareness of the call, without the development of the ears of the heart that are able to hear and feel that call, it doesn't happen. Okay, so there's the individual case. So now, great question, hologram. Beautiful. What would be the species version of that? What's calling us? Well, okay, the first tempting answer would be it's the soul of our species that's calling us. That on some level, collectively, we could maybe dive into what do we mean by collectively? Like in some communal context, we, if enough of us are together, and of course with the internet, in some ways we're all getting together on the planet, but if there's enough of us together, um, listening carefully with the ears of our heart, then we're going to hear the call of our species soul, which has something to do with a certain kind of partnership with Earth that people have spoken of. I have, you have, others have, as like a co-evolutionary partnership. It's not a strategic mind partnership. It's not something that we get to decide. That we, the strategic, heroic, early adolescent, egocentric mind is going to decide what this planet is for. No, it's going to be nothing like that. But we might communally, in a community basis, be able to start feeling what is Earth asking of us? What 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 is the imagination, the collective deep imagination coming up with? Okay, so maybe I just got this thought just now to wonder out loud with you if this is similar to where myths come from. By myths, I mean the sacred stories, not the false beliefs. So where do they come from? They emerge from a collective. They emerge from the collective unconscious or even collective consciousness of a particular people, a particular tribe. And some myths are similar to other myths found all over the world, and some are feel pretty unique. So they emerge from us, from a collective. They don't emerge from an individual, they emerge from a collective, from a way of being in the world in a particular place. Um,
And
so
I would say
let
they
me,
even emerge from the place.
and yes, now I'm recalling there are people are saying that the myths actually emerge from the place. Um, so what the crisis, the collective crisis, we all know about that, the poly crisis, the meta crisis, and so on. The call, what is the call and how can we open to that call? Now, here we have that same problem I mentioned before. Are we going to say that brilliant people like Bill and Sara can get together and create some practice, a process, and put it on the internet so it goes viral in 15 minutes? And we've got a certain tipping point of humans all doing the same thing. And by next year, this time, everything's changed. It's possible. I mean, something like that could actually happen, but that's that old thinking that we're going to fix it in a month or a year or a lifetime. But if we took the deep time perspective, how do we set up these? Now I'm thinking of the metaphor of the uh, listening, the technology listening dishes that are aimed out into far outer space that are listening for messages from distant galaxies. What would be our analogy of that? How would we create a psychosocial, spiritual device? I mean, it's not really a device, a phenomenon in which we can start listening collectively to what's calling us as a species. What would that look like? And for me, it would look like, healthy communities. Healthy communities that after a few generations would have approximately a quarter of its human members being initiated adults and a quarter genuine elders. So rather than see what I'm saying, doing here, I'm just playing here with you. But if your question was, how do we hear the call and what is the call? And even I just go to, well, we could do this in 5 years or 1 year or 3 months. We could really create a condition where we can really hear that call. And maybe that's true in some ways. But there's also the question, it might take, we're talking about the species level, it might take generations to create a circumstance, social, spiritual arrangements, where we can really, really hear how Earth is calling us as a species. What do you want to do with that there, Hologram?
Well, impossible. Um, I mean, one of the weavings I want to just circle to is myth,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because if myths, which I believe they are, as a Earth-centric storyteller, um, when I'm preparing to tell a story, and I usually tell stories that have an initiatory feel to them, a journey and a transformation within them. The first thing I do is I go out on the land. I get the bones of the story in my awareness. And then I go out onto the land and I tell the story. Um, in a way, I'm sort of telling it to them, but I'm not actually telling it to them. I'm overhearing how they're telling it through me, is more what I'm doing.
yeah,
And the and I'm overhearing the way they tell it to me in this place at this time, and I'm holding in my intention and my awareness the people I'm going to be telling it to. Um, so that, and then I come back in and I tell the story, and it's, it's the one I've heard from out on the land. So that's my lived experience of stories, being kind of birthed from place or being in a conversation with place through my body, through my niche, with the niche that is the place. Um, and boy, those kinds of stories are definitely, for me, kind of mythic maps of the initiatory journey. So there's a way that those um, are not only hearing, but amplifying the call, and maybe have always done. What if that was one of the ways that Earth is dreaming, seeding? Because as we've said, it's been a long time coming. And maybe even before the crisis was manifest, here's a wild idea. What if the seed of the crisis and the call were already in the birthing of humans? Just like the remembering,
yeah,
the knowledge, the knowing is we know it before we come and then we forget. Well, what if that was true of us as a species? Then, in fact, the seed, the wounding, the initiation, would already be seeded in the DNA, the psychospiritual DNA of humans. And what if myth, the old stories, the big stories, um, are ways that Earth is calling to us, through us? The soul of Earth is calling through and to the soul of humans as a species, about remembering. Here's instructions how not to forget. Here's a map, um, of the journey. Please take this with
mm,
you.
mm. I love that. Okay, now let me use my silly analogy here of those large array antenna things, whatever they're called, that have been aimed out into space for a few decades, the listening for extraterrestrial communications. Okay, so there's two parts to that. There's the hypothetical messages that are being sent out into the universe that might make its those messages might make their way to Earth. There's the messages, and then there's the antennae, the discs set up to listen for such things. So in that analogy, the myths that have been like fruiting mushroom bodies of the mycelial network of the human unconscious, those myths, they're like the messages.
Mm.
Okay, so you know where I'm going. So what's the disc? How do we have the ears collectively to really listen to those? Like people like you, Hologram, can listen. There's a lot of people who are tuned into myths, and we're starting to learn again in the Western world how to be good myth tellers by studying with people like Martin Shaw. Um, and um, but what is it? And so there's a certain small percentage of humans who can hear those myths and be deeply moved by them. We might say, well, any human can, if they really listen, and there's someone actually to tell the stories, the myths. Well, there's not that many people who can really tell them, and there's not that many people who take their time to stop and listen. So what does it take to have the ear, the reception apparatus? Um, and I would lean towards saying, well, it takes a certain kind of community. It doesn't have to be a perfectly healthy, intact, mythically rooted community, but it has to be a much healthier community than we tend to have now. And so again, for me, it becomes a deep time project. How do we begin to create those communities where a group of people, namely the members of a community, can begin to really listen to the call that's been coming our way, been broadcasting our way forever through the myths.
Waiting for the crisis. Been broadcasting forever until the time of us perfectly creating the crisis is just what landed in me. It's like, yeah.
Yeah.
I had been thinking of it the other way around, but what if? And I would agree with you and alter or suggest to you that yes, community is one way, but I think there's many ways, and I think actually what needs to happen is it's a particular kind of consciousness. It's the consciousness that is what I'm calling earth-centric. It's the consciousness that is not stuck into the smallness and comfort and safety of human-centric consciousness. It's the consciousness that isn't rooted in modernity, in the quote problem, in the crisis, but has deep time roots. It's a consciousness that knows how, because by the way, Martin Shaw learned from Earth. I learned from Earth. I didn't study with Martin Shaw. I mean, I've since, I watched many storytellers in my life, but I learned how to tell stories from Earth, just like he did, which is, one of the reasons people go out on fasts or go through initiatory journeys is that it shifts consciousness to be able to hear the stories in the world around us, right? Day 3 of fasting, you can hear all the stories. So how do we develop? Here we are with the technologies of like, if we could develop an app, it would be to develop an app that everybody would do that would go viral, and in 1 year, everybody would have practices and technologies of consciousness shifting that are not necessarily only entheogenic. I mean, those have their gift and their beauty, plant medicine journeys, but there's many, as we know, many ways of shifting consciousness. So consciousness shifting plus intention. And I would say a community is one way of shifting consciousness in a collective. Having that kind of, quarter of people are initiated, quarter of people are elders. That's a particular kind of embodied consciousness, embodied collective consciousness. And there's technologies of within healthy communities, indigenous communities, of listening to the voices of them other than human. Right. So those technologies actually exist. And they existed for our indigenous ancestors whenever we had them last. So that's a curious question. Like, what happened? Why did we forget? And those of us who, moderns, and how did we get from there to here? And why is this necessary? If we were all living as indigenous peoples at one point, being in conversation with the earth, how do we find ourselves here? Why was this crisis engineered? What's initiation for as a species? To ask a impossible style question.
Again, there's a question, what's initiation for individuals? And a negative way to say it, a double negative way to say it, which I think is an okay way to say it. In other words, what's the bad thing we're trying to avoid with individual initiation? I tend to rather say, what's the really essential thing that we're trying to gain through it, which is soul initiation. But if you look at a double negative way, which might be useful here, then we could say the journey of soul initiation is to avoid the appearance, the emergence in any given tribe or community of an individual who has the capacity to destroy life, gaining any significant power to do that. So, and my guess is that in indigenous traditions around the world, it tends to be male-bodied, male consciousness people, a certain small, very small percentage of them, who in early adolescence gain a certain kind of power, social power, and are inflated and empowered by it, and decide, well, if I can have this much influence over others, and it feels this good to have that, then it would be good to have more. So greed, that greed is a capacity we humans have. Maybe all species do, but maybe we have a particularly virulent form of it. So the double negative version of the initiatory journey, the need for it is to keep that from happening, to keep basically certain young men from destroying the deep life of their community and the environment in which that community lives and the other tribes in the neighborhood.
Basically everything that modern humans are doing.
Exactly. So what's that old African proverb? If the young men, maybe it's just said the young people aren't initiated, they'll burn down the village in order to feel the heat, something like that. So it's that kind of thing happening where someone becomes, power hungry and ends up destroying the life of their people because of it. That's something that the elders recognize as a vulnerability, a liability within the human psyche, and you have to make sure that doesn't happen. And my sense is that the story I would tell is that all human societies, way, 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 way back, recognized that as a problem and did their best to keep it from happening. But a certain, even small percentage of time, it happens anyways. And when one tribe is infected with that kind of dominator consciousness, then it infects and destroys the neighboring tribes. And if that process keeps happening long enough, you get to the 21st century where virtually all partnership healthy societies, I'm using Rian Eisler's terms of partnership and dominator, the partnership societies are basically gone and it's all dominator. Um, and so this is the whole crisis that started, maybe 10,000 or more years ago, coming to its logical conclusion. And something something has to change now. Um,
I'm gonna name
yeah,
Dale here. That's thank you. And you said a while ago you even used the word beautiful. This beautiful capacity of humans to create
yeah,
crisis like this. So I'm wondering how that is in relationship with what you just said, because the story you just told was here's how things go wrong. And uh, but if this is the crisis that has manifested to meet the call, as we were just naming with myth and with Earth, and as humans were born, um, what if? And I don't know. This is a pretty audacious question, but what if the crises were not a mistake, and therefore not that everything? I mean, everything has gone terribly wrong, but what if it, in the deep time perspective? Do you know what I'm trying to say here? It's like
yeah.
a very scary, risky, strange kind of question to be asking, but what if somehow it is the beautiful crisis that is needed to initiate? And what if that isn't just about avoiding human greed? I mean, your assessment of the way that that has infected um, human societies and cultures over the last 10,000 years is, I think, very accurate. Uh, so I don't even really know what question to ask here, but this is sort of the neighborhood that I'm in,
Mm,
that's trying to
yeah,
bring something up inside of me. Can you hear what I'm trying to say?
I think so. Yeah. It's it revolves around the idea that this had to happen. This was unavoidable. This crisis was unavoidable. Um, because um, we humans were evolved with a certain kind of power that's not better than anyone else's or more intelligent. It's just ours uniquely. And and we have to learn how to use the power of this form of consciousness and this form of imagination and what we can do with our opposable thumbs and language and technology. Um, and so in a sense, as a species, we've created the circumstances for our own initiation. Um, so when we look at the pattern of within the universe, as Brian Swim and Thomas Berry, for example, identify in their book, The Universe Story,
Hmm.
we see that the greatest transformational moments are moments of utter crisis,
Mhm.
the greatest transformational moments in the universe, um, starting from the beginning. Um, and it's out of um, dire um, circumstances or catastrophes that new possibilities emerge.
Hmm.
And I think it's true. I can't give you examples right now, but I believe it's understood in the realm of biology that um, species tend to transform or diversify or speciate when they're under immense stress.
Hmm.
And right now, this is something I read recently in a book by Barry Lopez, his last book, Horizon. He's just summarizing research from evolutionary biologists and so on. And he's saying that he was saying, making that point I just made, but he's saying that um, that the human species is now under tremendous stress, in part because things are changing so incredibly rapidly. And things are changing so incredibly rapidly because of the circumstances that we as a species have created ourselves. Like one thing he said is that we're changing socially, technologically, and intellectually so rapidly as a species that the idea that one generation would have something to teach the next generation is becoming a quaint idea. Wow, what a comment. But we can see there's some truth to that. So that the point here now, I think the larger point is that the idea that we as a species are creating incredibly stressful circumstances that are forcing our own evolution, and more specifically, we say our own speciation. And there's speculation about the beginnings of different human species that are beginning to emerge out of Homo sapiens. Um,
Well, that's an interesting idea.
yeah,
Probably that we don't have time to get into now, but
no,
I'm very, it makes me very curious. Yeah.
So yeah, we've created exactly the kind of crisis that will require some major transformation, but transformation won't come through a strategic minds. Like the analogy here is that in the journey of soul initiation, what the major thing that happens is not, we don't get information about our soul niche. We do often, not always, but we usually get information about our soul niche, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is about how coming into the room, the space of our consciousness, of our ecological niche, um, that experience itself changes us just profoundly and deeply. Um, and as you know, recently one of our beloved teachers in this world has left this life, Joanna Macy, and so many of us are talking about all the things we learned from her, which is so true. But the impact someone like she has had, I believe, is primarily how we have profoundly been changed by her work, of which she's the root teacher, and not just by the information we've gotten from her. So as a species, we're going to be profoundly changed, not because we figure something out, but because, in part, because the crisis itself has its way with us. Okay.
Wait. Yeah. So I think the last thing I just want to bring in here, is like following the track of myth back and the living partnership cultures, indigenous cultures that are very much alive and present today. Most of which have undergone massive colonization and genocide, have had crises visited upon them in a particular way, and are remembering and tending culture, relearning language, and becoming renewing culture. I just have this sense in these last days, and it just comes up for me now. It's like, oh, the elders, like who are the soul initiation guides, species wide, right? Like, who are the elders that we have? And some of them are Joanna Macy and yourself and others. And like, I remember, I can't remember his name, Tuesday in Gibran. I remember Gibran Rivera saying, you know, my people have already lived through the apocalypse. And that's still so with me in the recognition that the stories and the songs and the way through and the way consciousness has been shaped and the way myth has been shaped and changed and the way culture is being remembered and renewed is actually happening in our midst through indigenous communities and indigenous cultures who are still having them practicing the ways of listening with those ears. And how precious it is, and how much risk there is in the continued devastation of wild places.
Yeah.
So because of our elder humans who maybe haven't forgotten as much as we have.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of, am I going to pronounce this right? The Koji people in South
Kogi.
America?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry?
Colombia. Kogi in Colombia.
Kogi, yeah.
Kogi. Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah.
They refer to most of the rest of humans as their younger brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And they might be an example of a species-wide elder.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm thinking back to the Hopi people in American Southwest. That's not what they would refer to as American Southwest, but that's geographically locating them. When I was younger, I spent some time there on the Hopi mesas and had the profound privilege to go into their kivas, one in particular, during one of their ceremonies in the winter. And my sense of it was like being in the engine room of the universe. That's a very technological Western metaphor. It's like this is what's keeping life going here, and it's not just one person, it's not just one elder. It's the practices, the ceremonies that go back longer than anybody can know, that have been evolving, but they do these practices to keep life going. And it's those practices as embodied by a people and a community that is a kind of elder. That's the feeling I got. That, and this is resonant with the idea that we've heard from Buddhist teachers that the next Buddha will be a community, not an individual. So that brings me back again to, evidently there are some indigenous groups that still have intact traditions and communities and living relationship with their mythologies. But we also, I think we have the task, the necessary task of beginning to create our own postmodern versions of healthy communities, and that's going to take a few generations. And that's the task that is most exciting to me in my life at this time, is how do we plant the seeds and build the foundations for postmodern healthy societies, communities, knowing that it'll take several generations to get there. And that's why, as you know, I talk about transitional social structures and systems, because we can't get from where we are now, life-destroying societies, to life-enhancing societies without going through this long interim time of beginning to build life-sustaining societies. And then we're going to need certain social structures and systems that intact, or relatively intact, indigenous people in the world now, the few that are still here with us, they don't have, but we need in the interim, because they don't have the problem that we have. The problem is we've got a life-destroying society. They've got a life-enhancing society. And we've got to create something that we're not going to find in their societies because they don't need them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. They've been practicing life-enhancing ceremonies, rituals, and practices since the beginning.
Yeah.
Way. Well, that would, I guess, I feel like we're coming to the end of our time, clock time, and also the arc of the conversation, sort of, as T.S. Eliot says, arriving where we began, understand it for the first time. Bad paraphrase, but something like that. to end where we started with the deep time and the long view and understanding that we share, that there's a 500 year or 300 year. I usually use 500 because it's just not thinkable for one human life, but long time until we arrive at life enhancing cultures. Yeah. And the kind of really catching up with ourselves as a species, telling the truth about where we're at as a species, I think is a really important part of the work right now, so that we can be planting seeds and building transitional structures, organizations, groups, communities that are at that place of personal and collective and deep time and present moment. Yeah. Is there anything you want to say about the seed planting that you haven't said yet, as a kind of prayer, vision, longing, blessing?
I actually do. Partly to my
Great.
surprise, I do that. Something like this.
Excellent.
Let's get not only comfortable with the idea that we will never see what's needed in our lifetimes, not only comfortable with it, but can we get to the point where we feel blessed by it? We feel how lucky that that's true, because it means we have to create communities that will hold this. Let's call it the human project. The human project needs to be held now by communities. Individuals can't do it. It's way bigger than a lifetime. What if we could not only make peace with the fact that we can't do it individually and we won't see it in our lifetime, but feel like a tingling sensation all over our body of grace, that is true, because it requires us to depend on each other and to be in community in a way that that it's like a call. It's like that's what's calling us, is to work on projects so big it requires multi-generational communities. I guess that's my prayer.
May it be so. Thank you.
Thank you for this time together, this edgy conversation. Yeah, you're really good at it. Or maybe, I'm just particularly vulnerable to your spell. That could be what's going on here.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. And there's a particular kind of dreaming and dreamer that you are, that creates a space big enough to play in.
Great. Yeah, let's keep playing.
Yes, please.
Thanks for showing up today. We so appreciate you taking the time to drop in and listen as we, as usual, grapple with big concepts at scale, as well as the human heart and the longing for a just, compassionate world. I hope you've taken some things with you for how you might cultivate a relational culture in your own communities, ways of being, families, in your own heart. Hopefully you were inspired to tend the threads that you were carrying. And if you would like some support along the path, or to weave more deeply in community, please do join us to sign up for our newsletter at www.starterculture.net. Join us for one of our online free mini courses on inner-led change and the 4 vital ingredients, or participate in one of our online programs, which are a container to invite you out into the wild world, the other than human and the more than human world, and listen in for the dreaming of what is possible in these times and the way you uniquely are to respond. Or join us for an in-person program We have a power gathering coming up, an 18-month fellowship beginning next April.